Now, if you've just bought the new Lito X1, you're probably not getting the footage that you think you should be getting. And this is because you do need to change a number of settings on the drone to get the maximum from it. So out of the box, this drone is set up for beginners, but not for the best quality, not for cinematic footage, and definitely not for full control. So in the video, I'm going to walk you through exactly what changes you need to make immediately to the Lito X1, including things like the sharpness, noise reduction, obstacle avoidance modes, return to home behavior, and even some of the hidden features like the augmented reality and cruise control. So hopefully by the end of the video, your footage is going to be that much sharper and cleaner. I'd also like to point out the fact that I'm not sponsored, so if you could do the like, subscribe, notification bell and the hype, that would be great. I'd also like to say to Beer Can, thanks for telling me how to pronounce the name of the Lito, and I'd also like to say to Toon Droon, this is what sunshine looks like, mate. So anyway, I'll crack on with the video. So the first thing we're going to look at is going to be the sharpness and the noise reduction. Now, DJI cameras do tend to over sharpen an image, and this can actually hurt your footage. So we do need to change the settings. You want to switch the sharpness down to -1 or -2, and then also bring the noise reduction down to -1. And this is because a high sharpness is going to mean that you're going to have artificial edges, and that's going to make your footage look sort of crunchy. And then with high noise levels, it's going to give your image a sort of grainy effect. So again, you need to reduce that down. So lowering both will mean that your footage will look more natural and give you better flexibility when you're editing. So you need to think of it like this. You want a clean base image and not something that's going to be overly processed. So to access the settings, just to change them, it is a matter of just pressing the 3 dots on the top right hand corner, go into camera and then scrolling down to where it says style, and then you can adjust them from there. Next thing I'm going to look at is going to be the obstacle avoidance. Now, you know that the Lito X1 does have 360-degree obstacle avoidance, meaning that it's going to detect anything which is around it and then, depending on the settings, move out of the way to stop it crashing. Now, with this, you've got 3.5 settings in relation to obstacle avoidance, and I'll go through each one with you. The first one is going to be off, and you're just going to be an idiot if you use this, because it just means that if the drone is moving forward, backwards or whatever, it detects something, it's going to crash and you're going to end up with a drone that's totally unusable. So my recommendations is, unless you are an absolutely expert flyer, never ever switch the obstacle avoidance off. Next one you're going to have is going to be brake. Now with brake, as the name suggests, it just means that the drone is going to stop when it detects something. Now this is great if you aren't just learning to fly, because it means as you fly in, something comes into its path that you haven't noticed, the drone's going to stop. But there are a few downsides to brake. One of these is, for example, you could be out on your bike, the drone is following you, it detects something that you thought was going to be okay, it's going to stop, and then before you know it, you're a couple of 100 yards away and you haven't noticed the drone is missing. You've got to turn around, go back and locate and recover the drone. So a low brake, it may be good in some environments. It's not one I tend to use a lot of. I tend to stick to the next one, which is going to be the bypass mode. So with bypass mode, all the drone's going to do is, as it detects something, it's automatically going to move left, right, up or down to avoid actually hitting that object. So as the name suggests again, it's just going to bypass around it. And that is my preferred option, because it means I haven't got to worry so much about where the drone is when it's following me. I know that it's going to find a way around and keep up with whatever it is I'm doing. Or if there is something in the way when I'm flying, it's just going to move around that and it's going to be perfectly safe. But as I said, you've got 3.5. And the half comes into the fact that with bypass mode, you've got 2 subcategories. So you've got normal and you've got nifty. Now with normal, it means that the drone's going to have a little bit of leeway when it's actually moving around something. So that's going to be the safer option. With nifty, it's going to reduce that safety of margin quite dramatically closer to the drone. So this means that even though you've got it in bypass mode, you do run the risk of the drone actually hitting something, because it's going to take a few more risks to try and get through narrower gaps. So again, for me, unless I'm actually flying in somewhere where it's really enclosed, I just tend to leave it on to the bypass mode and leave it in normal, because that's the safest option for me. Now, if you want to change these settings, there are 2 ways you can do it. You can either go again into the menu, which is the top 3 buttons on the right hand side, go to safety and then come down to where it says obstacle avoidance, and there you've got the options where you can change them. The other option you've got is directly from the main screen, where you can press the little white or red circle icon in the top right, and then that's going to bring you up the options directly on the screen of your controller, so you can decide from there which way you want to go. But as I said, personally, I just leave it always in bypass and on normal. So the next one you're going to have is going to be return to home. So return to home just means that when the drone is out wherever you're flying it, if you want to bring it back or a number of different scenarios kick in, the drone is automatically going to stop its flight path and then come directly back to the home point. So there's a number of ways this return to home is going to kick in. The first one is manually, just by you pressing the return to home button on the controller, and that's going to bring the drone straight back to the home point. The other two are going to be if there's a loss of signal, or if there's the battery is started to get low and the drone thinks it needs to come back before it runs out of power. So when it does come to doing the return to home altitude, just go into the safety settings and you can see the option there for auto return to home altitude, and you just put that slider across to whatever you think is suitable for the location you're in. So when return to home actually kicks in, it's going to act in one of two ways. The first way you've got is preset. So with preset, the drone is going to rise up to a predetermined height that you've set on your controller. It's going to fly back in a straight line and it's just going to land. Now with preset, you control the height, and you need to set it really above the tallest object you've got in your surrounding area. So if you, for example, you've got a tree which is 10 meters, then you need to set the return to home height to say 20 meters. You know it's going to cover it. Also, if you are flying in a forest or something, you want to have maybe the return to home height lower so it doesn't actually hit the canopy. The second way is going to be the new feature that they brought in a couple of drones ago, and that's going to be the optimal return to home. So with optimal, the drone is going to try and follow its own flight path back, because it knows that the way that you've flown it is already been safe, so it's going to rely on that to come back. But this again is split into two subsections, or three actually. The first one is if you're within, I think it's 5 meters of takeoff point, it's just going to land. So you need to be careful of this, because if you're, say, the drone's over a cliff, you click on return to home, the drone is just going to land because it thinks it's close enough to you. It's not going to realize there's nothing below it. So you need to bear that in mind. The second one is if you're less than 50 meters, the drone is just going to basically do a similar thing to the preset, where it's just going to rise up a little bit and then fly back and then land. And then if you're over the 50 meters, this is where the actual optimal mode really kicks in, because that's where the drone is going to fly its way back of its own accord using the flight data and the AI sensing on the drone itself. Now, as I said, the return to home feature will kick in either when it's manually activated, there's a low battery, or it loses its signal. But when it comes to losing its signal, you've got three options again of which way the drone can behave. So if you go into safety, scroll right the way down to advanced safety settings, you'll see there a subsection for signal loss. And then this is going to give you three options again of return to home, hover, or descend. Now, in my experience, it is best to leave it set to return to home, because you know that if anything goes wrong, the drone is going to come back to you and it's going to land safely where you are. Then if you pick descend, the drone's going to do exactly that. It's going to lose its signal and it's just going to descend back to the ground. Now this can be dangerous because obviously you don't know where the drone is. So say for example you were flying over the sea that I got here, the drone's just going to go straight into the water and you're going to lose the drone. So again, I wouldn't tend to use descend. And then the final one you've got is going to be hover, and the drone again is just going to stay in that one position until you go to recover it or the signal comes back in. But once again, you're looking for trouble, because it could be that the drone is above a canopy, or it could be out to sea, and again the drone is just going to hover there, and then if you don't get the signal back, it's just going to wait until the battery runs out and it's just going to descend into whatever area it is. So that again can be quite dangerous. So really you just need to stick to using the return to home, because that's going to be the safest function. Now, if you are moving about, then you can update the home point to the location of the controller just by pressing the safety settings and then going into update home point. There's a number of options of these again, but that's going to be a separate video because it is quite in depth, just so you know that you can update the home point if need be to wherever the controller is. When I do the video for it, it's going to be up there as well. Also under the safety features, you've got the option to find my drone. And this is basically used that should the worst happen and you do lose the drone somewhere, this will show you on the screen exactly the drone's last location, so you can go back and recover the drone. It's also going to give you the option to have the drone start beeping and flashing, so that's going to give you an audible and visual representation of where the drone is as well. So when you go to recover it, it's going to be easier to locate. And again, because the drone's only been out a couple of days, there will be a full video on Find My Drone, and that's going to be up here for you as well. The next one isn't really a setting on the drone, it's just more of an informational thing when it comes to flying. You need to bear in mind wind conditions, because when you take off, the wind conditions can be totally different to what they are up above you or further away. So it may be nice and calm where you are now, but if I was to fly the drone out to sea, the wind could be dramatically higher. So always bear that in mind as well, because if you're going out with a tailwind, it generally means that when they bring the drone back, you're going to have a headwind, and if you've got a headwind, that's going to use up more power and it's going to drain the battery faster. So really, guys, I can't believe I said guys. So really, you need to bear in mind the wind conditions as well when you are flying. Obviously, you've got a nice day like this, you haven't got much of a problem, but if you do get a bit of a breeze, it can cause a big difference with the drone, even though it does have a level 5 wind rating. And this is the point where I'm going to stop for 2 minutes and say I'm not sponsored. As I said, I had to buy the drones myself, so if you could do the like, subscribe, notification bell and the hype thing, that would be great. I'd also like to say a big thanks to Juice KC and Lee Hawks, and they supported the channel by doing a buy me a coffee, and there's a link for that below if you'd like to do the same. And any funds I get from that is going to go towards new drones and new equipment to help the channel grow, so that's greatly appreciated to Lee and Juice. So the next thing is going to be video encoding. Now this only really applies if you're filming in 1080p. If you're filming in 4K, the drone will automatically encode the footage into H.265, and that's going to give you the 10-bit color profile if you're shooting normal. Now, if you decide you want to shoot in 1080p for whatever reason, you've got the option of shooting in 264 or 265. Now, if you use 264, it's only going to use an 8-bit color profile as opposed to 10, and that's going to mean you're going to have fewer colors available, so you may get some banding in your images. So again, if I was you, always leave it in the 265, because that's going to give you the maximum amount of flexibility and color if you're filming in auto modes. But obviously, if you do want to take a step further, you want to switch over to D-Log-M, and that's going to give you a flatter color profile. And also on the DJI website, there is a LUT or lookup table, and that will help you in your editing if you want to bring the colors back. And if you are shooting in D-Log-M, if you go into the camera settings, you'll see an option there for camera display assist. And what this will do is it'll bring the color back onto the controller, so that's going to look more natural for you, even though it's going to still give you that flat color profile on the actual footage. So that's the best way I find if I am filming in D-Log-M, because I can see more of the color profile. Now the next 4 things are all listed under the camera settings. So again, it's the 3 buttons on the top right, and the first one of these is going to be a histogram. So with a histogram, it brings up a small graph on the controller, and this will show you the light range from shadows to the bright highlights. So really, if your camera has a lot of peaking towards the left, it means that there's a lot of shadows. If there's a lot of peaking towards the right, there's too much highlights. So you want to try and get the graph more central, and that's going to give you a more balanced image overall. And you can do this either by using ND filters if you're in Pro mode, or if you want to go down and adjust the image value compensation on the bottom, that will improve the way that this histogram is going to look and ultimately improve your footage. Now the next one then is going to be peaking levels. Now with peaking levels, it shows you which part of your image is in focus and which part isn't. If you are shooting in autofocus mode, you don't need the peaking levels, because the drone is going to take care of everything for you. But the way that I like to do it is that I will go into peaking levels, I'll switch it to high, and then if for any reason that I've accidentally pressed the manual focus, and I haven't noticed, at least this way it's going to show me those red marks on the screen, so I know that I am actually in the manual focus mode as opposed to autofocus. So you may never use it, but it's also better to have it there just in case you do happen to press the button by mistake, and that could mean that your footage is going to be out of focus and ruined. Third one is going to be overexposure warning. Now when you are out filming, especially in bright sunlight, you may get parts of your image which are going to be totally blown out and not going to recover any details from that. So if you switch the overexposure warning on, it means that you're going to get what they call zebra lines coming on the screen. and those zebra lines show you then which part of your image is overexposed. So again, you can go in and adjust the settings, even if it's just the evaluation compensation, down to about -3 or -7, and that's going to improve the image again no end. And it is simply a simple matter of switching it on. You don't get the zebra lines coming in on your footage. It's purely there for you to be aware of which part of your image is actually blown out. And then in this section, the final part you got is going to be grid lines. Now, grid lines are only there to help you with your composition when you are filming with a drone. And you either want to use the rule of thirds, and that means that if you've got a main subject, you want to have it on one of the lines, either horizontally or vertically, never really in the middle, as I've got here with the background behind me. So if, for example, you are filming a beach, you want to try and get it with the beach on the bottom third or the top third, and then that's going to be a much more pleasing image to the eye. Again, if you are filming something like, say, a building or a tree or something like that, you maybe want to get it on one of the left or right, because again, that's going to give you a more pleasing image. So you can have three options when it comes to grid lines. You've got the actual lines up and down, left to right, which is going to do the rule of thirds. You've also got diagonals coming from top to bottom across the screen, and the final one you got is a center point. Now, the center point is there for if you actually want to center something, say you're doing a top-down shot and you want to get whatever it is directly in the center of the screen, then that's when you'd use the center point. But for me, having all three on is too much, so I just tend to have the grid lines up, down, left and right, and the center point. I don't really need to use the diagonals, because where they intercept is where the center point is anyway, so it's just too much clutter on the screen. Now, the next one for me is possibly one of the highest changes you can make, and that's going to be button customization. Now, depending on which controller you're using, if you're using the RC2, you've got the two function buttons at the rear of the controller. If you're using the RC-N3, you've got a function button which you either press once or twice. Now, the purpose of having the function buttons means that you can automate some of the moves for the drone itself. So what I tend to do is I'll go into the settings, go down to control, and then go down to button customization. And then on button customization, you can decide what you want the buttons to do. So for me, I tend to have my C1 button sent to exposure lock, and this means that when the drone's actually flying, I can just press it and it's going to lock the exposure in, so I know the exposure is not going to change when I'm flying. And that can make a massive difference to your footage, because everything's going to be nice and consistent, especially if you are, say, going from a light area to a dark area or vice versa. Or if you're doing, say, a panoramic, the exposure is not going to change as the drone moves around. Then when it comes to the C2 button, I set this to cruise control. Now, with cruise control, all it means is that when you've got the drone going along in a specific direction at a specific speed, and if you're climbing or going flat, you can set the cruise control, and then the drone is going to consistently travel along in that direction. You can take your hands off the sticks and the drone is going to keep on going. So it means that you are going to get nice smooth footage, because nothing's there to interrupt the drone. You know, sometimes you could be flying, you're going to accidentally nudge the stick, the drone's going to go off to one side. So cruise control really is the key for getting nice, smooth, and I hate to say the word cinematic footage, because everything the drone does is going to be controlled automatically, and that's the way to go. And again, there will be a full video on cruise control up here for you to watch later on. Now, obviously, having the exposure lock and the cruise control are not going to be the only options you've got. You've still got things like the increased evaluation, decrease it, camera settings, adjust focal length, focal track, landscape, portrait mode, and playback. So obviously it depends on what you want to do, but for me, I just tend to have the auto exposure on as well as the cruise control, and that's what works best when I am out filming. And then finally, with the button customization, you can control the actual dials as well. So you could have it for zoom in or zoom out, or for increasing the exposure values, whatever you feel is best for you. So then you've got a few of the lesser options, and the first one of those is going to be the power on when you unfold the drone. So this is going to be under the safety settings, and it just means that when the drone is unfolded, the drone's automatically going to power on, and again when you fold it up, it's going to power off. Now, it's all based on the rear right hand leg. So you can unfold the other three and the drone's not going to do anything, but once you put the fourth leg down, that's when it's going to kick in. But you do need to be aware with this is the fact that if the battery is dead and you put a new battery in, if you've got that set on, the battery is automatically going to get the drone to start up. Then you're going to have the AR settings or the augmented reality. And basically this is just going to put more information on the screen for you. So you can see, for example, if the drone's doing a return to home, you're going to get a green line to show you the route that it's taking. So you can decide then if you need to stop it at any point, if it's going to run into trouble. It's also going to show you the home point on the screen, as well as having a shadow of the drone, that when you coming into land, you can see exactly where the drone's going to go. So again, keep this switched on because it is going to give you information that you will find invaluable. Now, depending on where you are in the world, depends on the settings and regulations for where and when you can fly the drone, especially the height and the distance. Not every country has a visual line of sight rule, and not every country has the same height rules. So I think, for example, in the UK, it's a matter of 120 meters above the drone, where in Europe, I think it's 120 meters from the takeoff point. So this does vary wherever you are. So if you go into safety and you scroll down, you can see the max altitude and the max distance. So for me, I tend to keep it set the 120 meters, unless I am actually filming somewhere where I do need to go higher, because I can do it above the ground level. I'm living in Wales. We have got a lot of hills, so there are occasions where the drone does need to go above that 120 meters, but it's still within the regulations we've got from the closest point to the land. Obviously as well, you've got the visual line of sight rule, so you can set the drone to fly either unlimited or keep it within a specific distance. So I tend to keep it around about 800 meters, because I know that pushing it for what I need to do, and depending on the circumstances and where I'm flying, that 800 meters is going to be on the maximum of what I can see. So again, it's up to you what you do with this, but just bear in mind that you can set the limit for the height and the distance depending on where you are and what you're actually doing. So that's going to take us on to the photography aspect of it. Now, on the Lito range, you've got the options of taking photos in 12 megapixels or 48 megapixels. And again, for me, I tend to do it in the 48 megapixels because that's going to give me the maximum of flexibility when it comes to editing the photos. The other option you've got is the fact that you can either take the photos in JPEG, RAW or both. And again, depending on where you want to film and where you're posting the photos, either leave it in JPEG if you're doing something just for social media, or if you want to do RAW, if you're posting for something which is more high-end, or if you want a combination of both, that's entirely up to you. Generally, JPEG is going to be fine for everyday use for most people, so I'll leave it as that. Then you've got the option of the aspect ratio. Now, the aspect ratio is either going to be 4:3 or 16:9. And depending on what you want to do and how proficient you are with editing, I do tend to leave it as 4:3, because if you set it to 16:9, all it means is that the drone is going to crop that image in from 4:3 to 16:9, and you can do that yourself in post-production. It also means if you do it yourself, you've got more flexibility because you can have more verticality in the image, so you can adjust it up and down depending if you want to get some nicer framing. So obviously you go for the 16:9 if you want to, but if you want that bit more flexibility, then leave it to the 4:3 and edit it yourself. Also, when it comes to changing any of the settings for photography, or in our case video, if you just press at the figures on the bottom right hand side of the screen, that's going to bring up the options you got to change any of the settings. So you don't have to go into the main menu to look for them. You can do it directly from the main screen of the controller as well. And then you've got the actual shooting mode of the drone itself. Now, it does shoot vertically, but you need to remember that when you do the vertical shooting, it's not shooting in 4K. It's going to give you an image which is 2.7K, because what the drone does, it'll shoot it in 4K, but it's actually going to crop the image into that vertical perspective. So again, if you want to, for simplicity, shoot in vertical for things like social media, but you may be better off shooting in horizontal, getting the full 4K image, and then if you want to crop it in, you can do it yourself, because you're not going to be restricted to having that central image. There may be something off to the left or the right, and it means if you edit it yourself, you can adjust what part of the image you want to be shown, so it's going to give you, again, more flexibility. So I would say shoot in 4K unless you don't want the hassle of editing down yourself, because 4K is going to give you more flexibility. Also, if you are filming in auto, you want to bring the exposure valuation down to -0.3 or -0.7, because again, with DJI cameras, they do tend to overexpose, whereas if you bring them down slightly, it means you're going to get more detail in your footage. So even if it's underexposed, you can bring those details back, whereas if an image is overexposed, those details are lost forever. Okay, so that's the end of the video. As I said, it's only a short introduction of some of the changes you need to do to the drone to get the best out of it at the beginning. There's a load more things you can do with the drone. As I said, you've got the active track, you've got the cruise control and the button customizations, you've got the dynamic home points, and there's going to be all videos for these along with the channel over the next days and weeks. So all it remains for me to say is, if you found it useful, if you could do the like, subscribe, notification bell and the hype. There's the option there for the buy me a coffee or the hype, and honestly guys, that would really be appreciated, because it does mean I can expand the channel more and do videos like this. If you got any questions in relation to the Lito X1, the DJI Mini 4 Pro, Mini 5 Pro, the Neo 1 or 2, the Hover X1 Pro or Pro Max, or anything else which is drone related, let me know in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer you as soon as I can. And again, thanks for watching. Oh, and if there's anything, no, I said that, and that's it. So thanks very much, and diolch yn fawr.